Good evening. It's April the 18th, 2024. This is a talk sponsored by Amnesty International 1112, based in Philadelphia. And we're very lucky to have Jennifer Estrada talk to us. Jennifer, all yours.
Thank you so much, Susanna. I'm just going to share some slides with you all today. Hi, everyone. As Susanna said, my name is Jennifer Estrada. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the Community Program Manager at Amnesty International USA. So in my role, I work to support our networks of grassroots activists mobilizing for human rights across the country. This includes our local group network, as well as faith-based groups, activists who are transitioning from online to offline activists, as well as member leaders who support these folks across the country and in their state, our area coordinators who are my partners in all things Amnesty. So I am going to share a little bit today about myself. Before I dive into my story, my path to global human rights activism, I'll just start by saying I grew up in Queens and Westchester in New York. And so in and around New York City. I now live in upstate New York with my partner and our dog, Belle. This is Belle. She's 5. She'll be 5 in May. Feel free to send puppy birthday gifts. And now I live in the Catskills area. But I've had a journey that is not a straight path from Queens to upstate New York. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with y'all tonight. So my story started when I started in college. I went to Amherst College. I graduated in 2008. And during my time there, I studied psychology. I focused on developmental psychology and social psychology. I was also, this is also where I got involved in social justice work for the first time on campus. Like many folks, I was a member of a group called La Causa. This is the group on campus. La Causa means the cause in Spanish, and it was a group of folks from Spanish-speaking countries and communities uplifting issues that impacted Latinos on campus and in the community. Through La Causa, I also went on a trip to the Dominican Republic, working with an organization in the DR to rebuild schools, a school, and also to work with local educators and leaders to develop learning programs for the kids and in rural communities in the Dominican Republic. And this was one of the first times I was really able to learn hands-on about what it looks like to engage in community-based advocacy and take that into a global context as well. My story continued at Amherst through a fellowship that I received. So I was able to do a fellowship at a place called the Children's Village. This was a really formative experience for me because the program is called Books for Boys, and it focused not just on the fundamentals of reading, of literacy education, but really on building a love of reading in the community on the campus. And so it was an opportunity for me to really think about equity in new ways. So what does it mean to provide equitable education opportunities? The kids at the Children's Village, I should have said, were children who were not thriving in the New York City foster care system. So they were placed at the Children's Village, a residential treatment center. So there they received schooling as well as social services. And this program was created with an eye toward equity in education. So really striving to create a learning environment based on a love of learning and based on the interest and the likes and the passions of the students there. And so after I graduated, I joined a nonprofit founded by actually the founder of the Books for Boys program called Lit World. It was a brand new nonprofit organization at the time, so I got in right at the ground level, which was a great opportunity to learn how to build a nonprofit from the ground up, you know, what is involved in developing a mission, finding, you know, your partners, your supporters, you know, really connecting with communities. The programs we developed built on the Books for Boys model, so focused on literacy and self-expression, but built on them by focusing on these as tools for personal empowerment and community transformation. So how can we leverage storytelling skills as a way to cultivate advocacy skills and support folks in thinking about not just what do I need, but what does my community need? And how can I go about finding the resources and the allies to meet those needs? And we worked very closely in partnership with community-based organizations in the US and globally. So my role was to work with grassroots leaders on the ground in their own community and think through how can we implement programming through this, you know, based on our mission, but that will in a way that will really be meaningful and impactful in the local context. So really trusting those community based leaders as experts on their community and working together to create something meaningful and impactful. And I was able to really learn from their expertise and their experience, not just in the US, but also globally. So I did a lot of work across the United States, in New York, in Detroit, in California, but I also did a lot of work in Kenya, where this picture is taken, as well as in Haiti and the Philippines. Before I decided to transition to my next role. So after a few years at Lit World, I decided I was ready to pursue a master's degree. I decided to study international education at Oxford University. It was, for those who haven't extensively traveled in the UK, Oxford was like Harry Potter come to life for me as a kid. I grew up reading the books. It was amazing to be in, you know, be in the learning environment, but it also gave me incredible insight into the importance of context in the way people learn, in what you learn, in what you value, and how those values impact what is discussed and what is talked about. And I was able to, at Oxford, I wrote my dissertation on the impact of social emotional learning programs in global context. So, and what that means is how social emotional learning is this, the skills that we learn. Sometimes people call them soft skills. I like to call them foundational skills because they really are like the base of the learning pyramid. They're things like our self-esteem, our self-awareness, our social awareness, how we navigate the social aspects of learning environments, and our own needs and self-awareness, so that we can then really engage in the more conceptual aspects of learning, like literacy and numeracy and things like that. And these programs are often studied in the US, but they're rarely studied in global contexts outside of the US. So I was able to leverage the relationships I had built through Lit World, specifically in Kenya and New York City, and did my research there. And in that process, I learned a lot about how to measure things that are often thought of as intangible and not measurable. And I also learned a lot about how community advocacy translates in different contexts. You know, we all think we're talking about the same thing, but then, you know, when we really ask more questions and unpack, you know, what a concept means to someone, like, what does it mean to, you know, have what you need to learn effectively, or what does it mean to have equity in the classroom, or what does it mean to you know, have a safe space for girls in a learning environment. All of that can actually look very different from community to community, and that was something that I was able to really take in and learn more about through the process of really striving to measure things that feel immeasurable, and through that tell the story of impact, and tell the story of the kinds of work that these communities were leading. And I used my dissertation to launch a short-lived consulting work doing impact assessment for nonprofits. But then I decided to go back into the service space. I spent a few years doing the consultant gig, and then connected with an organization called Global Glow, an organization that was working with Lit World and also doing independent advocacy and mentorship programs for young women and girls in the US and globally. And in my work for them, I really started to focus more and more on advocacy and that side of the work. So how do we advocate for gender equity in the US and globally? How do we coach other folks, both the young women and leaders in the community, but also, you know, our nonprofit partners and allies, both in the nonprofit space, in UN spaces, in the corporate sector. How are we helping others be advocates for equity as well? And that was really, you know, what got me interested and excited about the idea of you know, focusing on advocacy and activism. And I'll just share that before I move on, that this photo is from one of our biggest advocacy events, an event that I helped to spearhead and launch with the organization called Her Story Summits. These were multi-day advocacy workshops for young women and girls ages 13 to 16 from countries around the world. So we would bring together cohorts of girls from usually 10 different communities, a couple here in the US, and then we aim to have the majority coming from other parts of the world. They would come to New York during the Commission on the Status of Women, when the UN is hosting events, and nonprofits are invited to host side events around gender equity. They would prepare their stories and how they wanted to represent the work that they did in their community, the advocacy work they did in their community, and they would participate in a panel presentation that occurred alongside these UN events. And it was one of the initiatives I'm most proud of, and was a really powerful experience for these young people to be learning how to do that and to be able to practice in that space, in that context. But all of that leads me to my finding my way to Amnesty International. You know, after several years with Global Glow, I really decided to transition to a role that centered advocacy and activism. And for the past 4 years, I've been working at Amnesty International, really honing my skills on advocacy and activism, and supporting others in doing that activism work. So I am able to focus at Amnesty on supporting these networks of activists across the country in building their activist skills, finding the resources they need, sharing their skills and knowledge with one another, and really having the opportunity to be a part of the activism unfolding about the issues that I care about. And this is the last one was from outreach that I did at festival in Tennessee, focusing on LGBTQ rights and trans rights. And then this is from, as many folks will recognize, during our work on Leonard Peltier's campaign around his birthday last year, I was able to participate in the rally in DC. And this is, I will just say, I'll, pause in a second to take some questions, but it really has been incredible to have the chance at Amnesty to connect with other folks who care so deeply about these issues, to have a chance to share my knowledge and background, but also to learn from that of others, both staff colleagues and volunteer colleagues in the Amnesty community. And I am looking forward to continuing to do that for years to come. I have a couple of, takeaways that I have from my journey that I just wanted to share with you all. These are like my mantras in my work, the things that kind of fuel me and I try to focus on. I talked a little bit about this when I was talking about my time at Oxford and my dissertation. I always think to myself about measuring what I value and not just valuing what's easy to measure. A lot of times in our work, I get asked, how many actions were taken, how many, petitions were sent, how many laws were passed, and that's obviously super important. But sometimes it's the intangible things that really matter, for that long-term impact. Like, how many meaningful conversations did you have? Were you able to connect with that person and spark something in them that is going to make them want to take action, on their own, or learn more about this issue, or think differently, or vote differently? Those are sometimes things that we don't think to measure, we don't think to count, but I always try to hold on to that lesson that I have learned. I also will say that I am very much a lifelong learner. I ask a lot of questions. David can vouch for that. I really strive to always try to keep learning. And that's a value that I feel affirmed at Amnesty. I've had opportunities to keep learning with this community. And then I also, one thing that I think from my start in so deeply in literacy education, I think a lot about what is the story that we're telling, what is, how are we sharing, our experiences, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how are we using our story to invite people into the conversation, to invite people into this activism and into the work. The way I tell my story, that the arc from Amherst to Amnesty, it sounds very clean. It wasn't. There's a lot I leave out along the way, some detours, some twists and turns, but I've tried to learn how to tell that story in a way that is compelling and makes sense, for folks to see that journey in a way that might inspire folks to join, Amnesty, or join me in this kind of advocacy work, or find their own path. And that's something I think a lot about in my work day to day. Just, what are the ways that we can use the practices of storytelling to create community and to bring more folks into our community. So I'll end with that, and I hope that you all will keep in touch with me. This is my email address. I'll also drop it into the chat, and I would welcome any questions if we have time for that.
Okay, any questions? Thank you so much. It's wow, you've been to all the places I've been to. Okay. That's great, except you've obviously done a lot more useful things. Does anyone have any questions? I'm sure you do. But
I've got a
okay,
comment.
David.
First of all, Jennifer, I've got to commend you on your modesty. I mean, I've known you for just over 4 years, and I didn't know any of this stuff. Oxford University. It's I don't know many people. Well, one other person. I think I sent you in an email that went to Oxford University. So, modesty, but I tell you, you should share this stuff more often because it is inspiring, and perhaps share it with the wider Amnesty field, like when we do an area coordinators thing. Well, I mean, you're being modest, so if I was to introduce you and say Jennifer has got to tell you a few things, then maybe.
I do appreciate that. I learned while living in the UK. I went to Oxford, and then I lived there for a little while after that, and I learned there to be mindful of not oversharing the Oxford. It's kind of like being like, I went to Harvard, people don't love it, but no, I do appreciate that reminder. And I do think you're absolutely right that one of the things I'm thinking about for our AC retreat, but also for programming and opportunities for local groups as well, is workshops specifically around storytelling, bringing that storytelling piece into the way we approach activism. I mean what I say, like, I think it's such a powerful tool. And sometimes some folks are very comfortable with it, and some folks are a little bit less so. And I think we can, make it feel a little bit more accessible and easy to share our stories in ways that bring people in.
Yeah.
But thank you. I appreciate it, David.
Stories are, I know if you want to tell the truth, you have to make up fiction. The whole history of food in the United States. A law was changed in 1906 for meat after a book was written by Sinclair Lewis, I believe. Or no, maybe not. Whoever wrote it. But he wrote about this awful treatment of immigrants in abattoirs. And it so horrified the American public. And, there were a lot of advocates going around at the same time. And they'd been saying for years, you've got to change the laws, you've got to change the laws. But until actually it was put into a story that people could relate to. So absolutely.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's so interesting. One of the things that, has been studied is that the more folks read or hear, listen to the stories of other folks, narratives around other folks' lives, experiences, memories, the greater your empathy is. Right. Just like the act of hearing and listening to and absorbing or reading stories builds empathy, builds understanding, really organically. I mean, and the human brain is, I could go on. This is my like nerd zone. I love it. But the human brain is really like hardwired to absorb and remember stories. Like that's the way that we it is a way that we are naturally able to take in and process information. And it has a big impact, not just on I think we can think about it in terms of activism, but also daily life. The way that we connect with one another just in community, and day to day can be impacted by the stories we hear, what we read. I mean, you can see it with a lot of folks in more rural I'm in a more rural community right now, and that when information is limited, when access to stories about like actual stories and not just fictional and inflammatory narratives about people who are different than you, but like when you're limited your access is limited to real stories about folks who don't live in your community, who are not like you. Your perspective is shaped. Even folks who, in other contexts, demonstrate a lot of empathy. Oh, bye, Colleen. It was nice seeing you. In other contexts, demonstrate a lot of empathy. There can be a limit, a limiting factor. Anyway, but I truly believe like it can be a powerful tool, and it's actually been studied as one in different contexts, mostly in learning contexts, but I think the lessons apply to activism as well.
So are you using these tools at the moment for any particular campaigns, or, I mean, how can we help you? I mean, suddenly it's like, we didn't know you did this. Yeah.
Yeah, so in Amnesty's work, I think the place where story really gets centered is when we think about the individuals at risk work, the case commitments, our work around refugee rights, where we've spotlighted individuals and families. Those are so powerful. Any cases coming up in the crisis in Gaza, where we're learning about, journalists, students, uplifting and shining a light on those stories is really powerful. And those are, when we think about how we change, hearts and minds, people often, think that they're interested in and care about like the statistics and the facts, but what really sticks with people is the stories, is that human experience. It's what we remember, those threads, like, yes, some brains remember numbers very readily. Kudos to those brains. That's not my brain, but all brains latch onto stories, and given the opportunity to hear that narrative, absorb it. Also, human brains also require repetition. So that's another piece of the puzzle, sharing the story, repeating the story, but using, when, we do have those cases of individuals, those experiences, real experiences from a community, amplifying those stories, and sharing them can be really powerful, and creating space for conversation around it as well. I think, a lot of groups are, host letter writing events, host opportunities like that. I think in those moments, creating a little bit of space to share the story, not just relying on someone reading it on the case sheet, which is great to have the case sheet, and that's also important, but also putting a human voice to it, giving folks a chance to hear it, to absorb it, to really reflect on it, inviting folks to talk to one another about it. Those kinds of practices can really deepen someone's engagement with an issue, or thinking and reflection on a case. And like I said, it all builds to future action. It's about what folks are willing to do today, but also what we can inspire them to do tomorrow, when we're not, right beside them, urging them to do the thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. By putting a human face to the person for whom we're writing a letter, not just saying so and so was a journalist who was abducted on the 18th of December. But if we got more of the backstory, we get to know them more as a person, and with a picture. In fact, the group, I think I've told you before, the group in Ocean City, on every letter they send out to whichever government, always has a picture. Somehow Georgina finds a picture of them and includes that in the letter to that government.
It's very smart, very powerful.
Yeah.
And I was also going to share, this is not always something folks have capacity for, but, I know a lot of groups that will do film screenings, that will, there are some groups that are doing book clubs, human rights book clubs, finding, not necessarily always reading the whole book, but sometimes identifying a chapter or part of a story or memoir. When I worked with organization in Nepal, the youth there would put on plays. They would in the street. They would it's a little different, in Kathmandu, but they would write their own plays about the issues. They were really focused on issues around girls' access to schooling and the different factors around that. But they would write their own plays and put on short performances in the street, get folks' attention, get the attention of the school administrators, do things during other if there was a festival, a holiday, and they knew a lot of people were going to be out in the street, they would plan to be out there. It was very guerrilla activism, but but it was really effective, and people were really moved. They would sometimes do plays, they would sometimes do they would pair a folk song, a well-known song, with some pantomime. But it was very powerful, even though it wasn't a traditional narrative in the way that we're used to. Just another approach and another way of thinking. And I'm sharing this only because I think that there are so many ways to think about how we bring people in and how we inspire folks. And sometimes the unconventional can, even if it doesn't immediately change someone's mind, it gets them to stop and think a little bit, which can sometimes be an important beginning.
So how do we revive our chapter? I mean, it's hard to believe in Philadelphia with however many millions we have as a population, that we don't have enough people to have an active chapter. I don't believe that. And I'm wondering if a lot of the problem is that we're just not, that Amnesty International in New York isn't telling us people who are donating. I mean, is there some list of people in Philadelphia that we don't know about?
We can reach out to them, and Jennifer can help us do that by sending out an email to those people. We cannot have access to that list directly ourselves.
Oh no, well, no, I'm not. Yeah.
Did there used to be more groups in the city or in the area? Not in recent years.
Well, there was one in Chestnut Hill a number of years ago. That faded away. We still have the Westchester group.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
With Barbara, and of course,
they
in
come
Atlantic
and go
City.
They come and go on university campuses, right? It's
yes,
they come and go.
So a couple of things that I just want to offer out. One is that, as David said, we can send an email to all donors to Amnesty in the Philadelphia area. That's definitely something we can do. I can send. There's a short form to fill out where you give me the info, the subject you want, the text you want, if you want an image with it, and then we add it to our email schedule. The one thing I will say is that because someone gave a donation to Amnesty doesn't necessarily mean that they are someone who's going to show up to a group meeting or be ready to organize an action or event. And that's something that also if someone takes online actions, they may not be the person who's going to show up next week to do the thing. And that's often kind of a big disappointment for groups. So I just like to front load that,
Well, but
set
no, you of
expectations.
course, you're exactly
Um,
right. I mean, I know when I was the mother of 4 children and a single parent, I mean, I was donating and I wasn't able to do anything.
Right,
I mean, it's as
right.
simple as that.
And there's
It's still great to put it out. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Frank.
and there's so many worthy causes out there. It's like people have to choose where they're going to put their limited energy. And
Right.
and
Yeah.
the world's a mess right now. I mean, it just
It sure is.
it's really, I mean, one thing that strikes me is the refugee crisis around the world is
Mhm.
really, it's really driving,
Yeah.
you know, the right wing.
Yeah.
You know, it's in Europe, in India, it's, you know, Brazil. I mean, it's a real like 1930s moment, you know, I mean,
Mhm.
potentially. And it's
Yeah.
it's very disturbing. And it seems like the refugees in Europe are making everybody crazy, and in this country too, you know, people coming across the border, you know, people, you know, the nativism or the racism
Mhm.
that goes on, and overcoming that is just really a challenge, you know.
Yeah, no, I think Frank, you bring up a couple of good points, and I think I have a couple of thoughts. One is just circling back to the question about youth and student groups. If you're interested in connecting with or collaborating with youth and student groups in your area, just email youth@aiusa.org for an up-to-date list of the groups and their coordinator and faculty advisor contact info. You can also copy me on that email and I can help with next steps. But that is the fastest and easiest way to get that list. It does change. And
Oh
that's
yeah,
part of
sure.
why it's hard to keep like a map or a like public facing list up to date. So it's faster and easier for groups to just contact that email address and get, you know, here's what the latest is this month. So just wanted to offer that as well, because a lot of people ask about that, and some folks don't realize that that's something that you can do. But I did want to just share a couple of thoughts on the piece about, you know, getting folks' attention, getting folks, you know, interested. There are a couple of things that, you know, these are very general best practices, but I want to offer them as a starting point for a conversation around the specifics of what might work in Philadelphia. First, you know, Amnesty works on a ton of issues. It's important to think about you know, how you're pitching your group to folks and what are the issues. How do you want to talk about the work that your group does? And I have heard that from groups that it's really helpful to focus in on a couple of issues, you know, framing it as, you know, we're a human rights group. We work on, you know, we can do work on any human right that you might be interested in. It's a great opportunity for you to do the work that you care about. And our group has been focused on, you know, these 3 things so that folks can kind of wrap their heads around and digest, you know, what the group is all about. It's really, you know, great if like that intersects with what someone is telling you they're interested in, but it's also really important to be honest about what your group is working on, so that someone knows, you know, that they can, if they come in, you know, they can maybe lead some new work on Indigenous rights, and your group has been focused on, you know, a case commitment of, you know, a Uyghur Muslim in China, and a Uyghur Muslim being detained in Xinjiang, you know, human rights in Pakistan, and, you know, LGBTQ rights. Those have been like the focuses. And if this person, you know, has an interest in another topic, your group can get behind them. You know, so just being really clear, like, what is it that your group is working on under this umbrella of human rights? The other thought that I like to share with folks is that it can be helpful to think about, you know, think about like, are there, you know, 4 public things happening throughout the year that we can have a presence at. That we don't need, especially for like smaller groups trying to revive and revitalize, what is the community already doing? What is Philadelphia already doing that we can just be at and be recruiting and inviting folks to join us in these spaces, whether it's a pride parade or a farmer's market or, a big demonstration for, closing Guantanamo. You guys are the experts on Philadelphia. I am not. I am just a humble New Yorker over here. But what is Philadelphia already doing? What are people already showing up to? And how can our group have a presence there where we can be recruiting and where we can say, and the reason I'm saying think about like 4 things throughout the year is that if there's something in March and in May and in August and in November, you can say in March, like, so great to meet you. Come join us in May. We're doing this thing in May. Like, we'd love to have you be there. Maybe you can be behind the table with us in May. And kind of building, as opposed to thinking, how can I get someone to my next meeting? Because folks are not always as keen to join a meeting, but they might be, if there's someone who's already at the parade, at the festival, at the farmer's market, they might be more likely to say, oh yeah, I was going to go to that thing in May anyway. Sure. Like I'll be an Amnesty volunteer. Not everyone, but just a little bit more of an exciting, compelling ask than, okay. And we're going to have you come to the meeting. You can also invite them to the next meeting. Don't not invite them to that meeting, but bring them in with, we're a group that's out here in the community. We're doing this thing. We're going to do another thing in a couple months. We'd love to have you join us there. And, like give us your email address so we can invite you. And in between, and do invite them to the thing. Make sure you follow up on, that next fun event. But in between, say, hey, we're going to plan what we're doing in May and, come join us in April. So it gives folks a little bit more to latch onto and get excited about, as opposed to come to our monthly meeting where we plan our activism or, write letters like that. For folks who are brand new to Amnesty, that just might not be something that they're like understanding in the same way.
I think I'm trying to find the right analogy for if you build it, they will come. But I think what you're saying is go to them first and then they might come. But so I catch your drift. Go.
Yeah. And I'm saying like first. Find the lowest possible lift, what is already happening, where are folks already gathering, and be visible there.
Right.
And it's not every outing is going to bear fruit. I think part of it too is figuring out and thinking through what works for your group, what makes sense in Philadelphia. Who are you trying to recruit? Like maybe you set up a table at the farmer's market and you realize, like these folks are not interested in the issues that we're working on, or they don't have a lot of time. They're, a lot of families with very small children, like they're not going to be able to, come, but also maybe they will, because maybe they want to bring their kids to the next thing. Right. I think some of it is trial and error. Some of it is, being willing to try things out and having it not go well. But also always showing up with, with your visibility, with your, Amnesty stuff, t-shirts, material, so folks can see you, so folks can connect, giving folks an opportunity to take action, and also something that they can take home with them to remember you by. And myself and my colleague Maya and David are all here to support you in being, able to have a presence at an event like that and feel successful.
I've been, as you know, I live in Puerto Rico most of the time, whenever I
Living
can.
my dream, Susanna.
We never know
You
where
need
to
to come
find her.
visit.
That's the
But
trouble.
but anyway, there's been there've been a lot of demonstrations in Puerto Rico for Gaza. In fact, since October 7th, there's a wonderful organization called Madres contra la Guerra, and it's run by this wonderful lady called Dr. Sonia Santiago Hernandez. And she's run this organization for 20 years. And the minute she saw what was happening in Gaza, she organized her troops. And from 4 to 5 every Tuesday outside the Israeli consulate in Ato Rey, which is right in the middle of San Juan, she's had a demonstration for an hour. And I showed up for a couple of times there. And there's enormous support. And they've also had other big rallies in around San Juan. So what I do is I've tried to connect with people in San Juan who are in Amnesty International, and they send me letters, which is good, and I can now read Spanish, which is helpful. But what I do is I just show up and with my T-shirt.
Yeah, T-shirt's good. Yeah, the T-shirt's
I mean,
good.
it's like, okay, we may not have a lot of people, but Amnesty International's here. We're we're here, and that's and I think that's good. I think that's the first step, that anyone who's interested in Amnesty International should get a T-shirt. So how do we do that? I guess from the shop.
Yeah, just order them. Yeah, just order them. Yeah.
I need to order some more as well.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
That's good outreach, the T-shirts.
Yeah, and a banner. Even if I'm the only one. I mean, that's the thing. And
your group can definitely get a banner. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to talk.
Oh, yeah, but right. And Amnesty International wrote a report on Gaza and Palestine in 2022. So it's not something that that's against what's happening in Amnesty International.
No, yeah. Absolutely. And if your group doesn't have a banner, we used
to have one, but I don't know what happened to it.
We can send you a new one if you'd like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
But I always.
Who do you send it to?
Oh, I can.
Michael.
Let me put the.
You need to receive it.
Yes, Michael. You got to step
up
to Michael.
Send the banner.
I'll take a banner. I'll hold one side. Maybe David, you could hold the other side.
I will
go to a place with a lot of people, and then it'll look like we have.
Because I'm not around in the as you all know, I'm not around in the summer. I'm up in Massachusetts. So, don't send it to me.
No, send it to Michael, and we can figure out other people to hold the other side.
Send it to Michael. But I'm just going to add, and I know that Susanna and I have been back and forth on this a few times. We have where that Amnesty banner appears, we have to be careful as to what is being said in close proximity.
Oh, it's very tricky. Yeah, it's very tricky. It's very tricky. I mean, I'm in a real dilemma here at my building. I'm in a building it's 62 apartments, right? It's probably 3/4 Jewish, and anybody who's anti-Zionist is beyond the pale, and but I know some of the left-wing Jews here, I know where they stand, and it's such an explosive issue. And there's a lot of people here with family in Israel. There's some people who go back and forth, their children, their grandchildren are in the IDF, so it's really and it's dividing Jewish families. It's dividing congregations. It's really something. It's really something.
Yes, but that's right. And I've been accused of, oh, you're Hamas, you're pro, and I said I'm not pro anything. I just want people to stop killing each other. It's as simple as that. That's where I'm.
It's a distinction people won't make. It's
it's interesting.
Yeah.
But I will say I did just want to jump in with my staff hat on that if you're ever not sure,
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
ever like, I don't know if this is okay, send it to me, send it to Maya, send it to David. We will vet the materials for you. You know, we can vet, like if you're want to go to a demonstration and you're like, you know, this maybe is on the line, like, should I bring the banner or not? Send us the info and we can let you know if it's good or not. And I always like to encourage folks, like, you know, Amnesty is, you know, yes, we want you to take the actions that we're advocating for, and my job is to support, you know, activists in building the skills that they need to be effective in their activism, whether that's for Amnesty or for, you know, issues where you're not wearing your Amnesty hat. So please, you know, remember that you can still use the learning and resources that we provide. Even if you're not wearing your Amnesty t-shirt, we can still, you know, support you in figuring out the best way to approach activism. Even, you know, regardless of exactly how you're applying those skills.
Or just getting
Nice.
a slight change of subject, but getting back to Philadelphia, just to remind you all, and I know Susanna knows this, the anti-death penalty event that's happening sometime in the fall, we are seeing that as a hook for hopefully, we're being part of a coalition on the anti-death penalty. We're hoping people attending that. There is no date yet. There is no location. We're hoping that people, when that happens, that people attending it might take interest in being involved with Amnesty. I think you know about it, Jennifer. This is with Kathleen Lucas out.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's great. And I think, you know, at everything you plan, make sure there's a way for you to collect people's contact information.
Yes. Yeah.
Just, you know, especially if you're rebuilding, but like in general, I'm always trying to get people's contact. So just, you know, whether it's a sign up form, you know, if you need a template for that, I got templates. Like if you want a QR code, you know, let me know what you need to get to get the info you need to follow up with folks. And, you know, I'm happy to support. I know folks know this, but like I said earlier, the human brain needs repetition. So I repeat myself. But yeah, I think that sounds really good. Let me know when the event is scheduled. And we can also, you know, we talked about the email tool. You can also use that to invite folks to that event.
Yes, and I'm certainly looking to get you to help in Puerto Rico as well. And so we'll see what happens there. Does anyone have any last questions before we let Jennifer off the hook?
A maybe more than 2-minute question, but I'll take 1 minute's worth. For the odd human brain that does like the numbers, what would you say, or anyone here really, would y'all say is kind of like the data-driven and the logical case for why Amnesty, with all these other issues that are out there and with how complicated the world is? And yeah.
Yeah, no, and I let me just caveat that it's not the odd human brain that likes numbers. It's just like some brains are more comfortable with numbers, and most brains are like comfortable with narrative. And that doesn't mean not okay. Let me answer your question instead of going down the science rabbit hole. But it's like the idea of like a word problem versus the out anyway. But you're absolutely right. We need those like facts and information to help folks really understand the case, make the case for our work. And how I make the case for Amnesty's work is twofold. One, we are threefold, actually, sorry. One is that we're a nonpartisan, independent human rights organization. We work on human rights everywhere in the world, regardless of who's in power, and you know, where the human rights issue is happening. We strive to hold all governments and decision makers and powerful folks accountable for human rights violations, and that is not something that all organizations can say. And we don't take any funding from governments, from corporations, from political parties. Where, you know, all of our funding is independent, and that allows us to be unbiased and nonpartisan. I also, and all of our actions and activism are based on our independent research. So we're actively going out into contexts around the world to ensure that we have accurate information about the human rights violations, about what's happening, and our actions what we're pushing for is informed by that real world context, by the folks impacted by these issues, not by third parties. So that's one piece. The other piece that I talk about when I make the case for Amnesty is that we are a truly global organization, meaning, you know, if there are issues in any country around the world that you care about or hearing about, there's something happening at Amnesty in the constellation of Amnesty International offices that you can connect with. And we work on issues here in the United States, and we connect the US context with the global context. It's easy to think that, you know, it's easy to make a case for, oh, like this thing that's happening, you know, elsewhere is more or less important than what's happening, you know, next door for whatever reason. People try to like make those value hierarchies all the time, but the reality is that we're in a global society, and the laws and policies and practices here in the US impact what's happening in Peru, impact what's happening in India, impact what's happening, you know, in Syria. Like these, we're interconnected. And what is important to remember is that, you know, Amnesty is working in that way. We're working in a global context, and that again can be really powerful and different than a lot of organizations. And the last thing I'll say, the last thing I say when I talk to folks about why Amnesty is that we are unique in that we're one of the few organizations who work at the policy level and the legislative level. And we're also working on individual cases and at the community level. You know, we're advocating for, you know, justice for like communities impacted by human rights violations. We're advocating for individuals to be released from detention, and we're advocating for policy change. We're advocating for systemic change. We're holding leaders and decision makers accountable, you know, at multiple levels of government and society. And that's unique. A lot of organizations do one or the other, and not often both. And the last thing I'll say, I said 3, but, you know, I'm throwing an extra one in there for fun, is that Amnesty is also a membership organization, which is also really unique and cool. I, before Amnesty, was not as familiar with membership led organizations, and it's a really unique kind of space to be a part of, where, you know, you have volunteers and staff members working hand in hand to create campaign strategies and to, you know, think about how we're mobilizing folks or addressing issues. You know, there are a lot of opportunities, not just to take action, you know, on the issues you care about, but also to learn and become a leader around these issues. And that's also kind of an exciting benefit to being a part of the organization.
Okay.
Sorry, I know we're over
Thank you,
time.
Jennifer.
I gave you a 6-minute
But
answer.
I'd like to say how important Amnesty International is. I mean, because exactly right, that it isn't religious, although you can, no one has a problem with you having a religion, but there's no religious basis, which is pretty good. And it's also what I really like is how it started. You know, just write a letter to a prisoner and say you're not alone. I mean, I just think that's incredibly powerful. And also too, Amnesty International has a huge, well, people know who it is. I mean, I didn't get fined in Zambia because this policeman was told, well, she's from Amnesty International. And he said, go away from here, Amnesty. You know, I just thought that was pretty amazing because I was that's the driver told the policeman that I was Amnesty International, and then the policeman just said, okay, go away.
No.
So I mean, which was actually very interesting. But it does. Amnesty International has a huge reputation, and quite rightly. I just think it's an incredibly important organization. And the disaster in Ukraine in 2022, that was it's almost like Russia created that just to get rid of Amnesty International. And I think that's an enormous shame. I think Amnesty International is more important now than it ever has been, because there's nothing else like it. Anyway, go ahead, David.
Yeah,
Jennifer.
I'm sorry to interrupt there, but I have to get off soon. But first of all, I want to commend you, Susan, Doc, as I like to call Dr. Sue, for pulling this off and making it happen, and also for Jennifer for telling us her whole backstory that I'd never heard before. So thank you once again, Jennifer. But I do have to sign off now because I'm just borrowing space at Maureen's apartment, and she's anyway, I have to leave soon.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Great.
you, one and
Thank you.
all.
Good day.
Well,
Good day.
okay.
I'll be in
Any
touch.
last word, Jennifer, before we sign off?
Just thank you all. Appreciate your time, your commitment, your passion, and I genuinely hope you wrote down my email address and you'll keep in touch.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.